Ever found yourself quoting Billy Ray Valentine or humming those catchy opening credits? If so, you're not alone. Trading Places has claimed a cherished spot in film history. Today we'll peel back the curtain on this beloved 1983 comedy, revealing how tennis matches, near-missed casting choices, and even unintended legislative consequences all shaped the movie's legacy. Whether you've watched it a dozen times or just discovered it, get ready for fresh insights, untold anecdotes, and plenty of reasons to appreciate Eddie Murphy's breakout masterpiece. Number 1. Inspired by a tennis game. It all started with an unusually tense tennis match. Screenwriter Timothy Harris had a regular tennis routine with two brothers who were both doctors. What struck Harris each time wasn't just their skilled volleys, but the over-the-top rivalry simmering between them. Every missed shot ignited heated debate. Every point triggered delicate egos. The atmosphere was charged with sibling tension, so pronounced that Harris couldn't help turning it over in his mind afterward. He noticed how the brothers engaged in constant conflict about nearly everything: diet, exercise, professional responsibilities, even silly trivialities like which tennis racket brand was superior. Harris walked away from these matches convinced there was a good story buried in all this antagonism. He approached his writing partner Herschel Weingrod, pitching the concept of two individuals consumed by a perpetual debate. Specifically, whether a person's fate was shaped by inherent nature or the environment they were thrust into. From there, the pair tinkered with various outlines, gradually shaping a comedic narrative about wealthy siblings betting on social experiments to prove their viewpoint. They imagined that if you took a well-bred individual and stripped him of his resources while simultaneously elevating someone on the opposite end of the spectrum, you could watch their natures either triumph or collapse under the new environment. It was a clever framework that wove personal frustration, Harris's annoyance at the bickering tennis doctors, into a comedic screenplay. In the final script, the bet about nature versus nurture became the driving force behind Trading Places. Audiences might see it simply as a story where two men swap lives, but behind the laughter was the core concept born on a tennis court. Each time the Duke brothers glower at one another in the film, it mirrors those quarrelsome tennis matches, loaded with ego and rivalry. In that sense, a whimsical sporting anecdote blossomed into the comedic argument that defines one of the 1980s most beloved satires, proving inspiration truly can strike in the strangest places, even over a tense tennis net. Number 2. Influences from Mark Twain and others. Trading Places didn't materialize out of thin air. Instead, it borrowed liberally from literary and cinematic history, weaving together multiple strands of inspiration to forge its own identity. One pivotal source is Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper, that classic tale of two boys from wildly different backgrounds, one a prince, the other in rags, who exchange roles, revealing how social status can be surprisingly brittle. In the film, Louis Winthrop III resembles Twain's privileged prince, while Billy Ray Valentine echoes the resourcefulness of the impoverished youngster forced to rise to unexpected challenges. But Mark Twain wasn't the only influence. Screenwriter Timothy Harris also points to the 1935 short film Hoi Polloi, featuring the Three Stooges, which introduced the comedic premise of wealthy elitists making bets on whether a so-called commoner could be transformed into a gentleman. Audiences can trace the comedic DNA from the eye-poking Stooges. It leaped into a bigger, more polished 1980s production. Another link is the lesser-known British film Man with a Million, starring Gregory Peck, where a penniless drifter is given a banknote worth £1 million and left to navigate high society. Again, a comedic commentary on how illusions of wealth can transform social standing overnight. Even the name Billy Ray Valentine subtly references Henry Valentine from a Twilight Zone episode titled A Nice Place to Visit, a story about consequences when one unexpectedly gains wealth. Though the Twilight Zone plot veers into paranormal territory, the idea that sudden affluence can either liberate or corrupt a person resonates strongly. All these scattered sources coalesced in Trading Places, shaped and updated for an early 1980s audience hungry for snappy dialogue and big laughs. The film's brilliance lay in its ability to pay homage to these influences while charting its own comedic course. Viewers might recognize the parallels, like the swapped identity theme from TWAIN or the comedic bet from Hoi Polloi, but the characters, pacing, and modern spin made Trading Places feel fresh and biting. By weaving classic tropes into a newly minted story about greed, class division, and culture shock, the filmmakers created a timeless piece that harks back to older comedic traditions while winking cheerfully at contemporary sensibilities. Number 3, Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder, and Eddie Murphy's entry. In its earliest development phase, Trading Places was envisioned as a new collaboration between comedic heavyweights Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. At that time, the pair had already electrified audiences with hits like Silver Streak, 1976, and Stir Crazy, 1980, establishing themselves as one of Hollywood's funniest duos. Studio executives assumed tapping into their chemistry, yet again, would be a surefire success. The script, calling for two contrasting personalities thrown into each other's shoes, seemed to be a perfect match for Pryor's bold irreverence and Wilder's frantic charm. However, fate took a drastic turn. Pryor, struggling with substance abuse, suffered injuries that left him unable to commit. As the project reeled from this blow, producers considered a newcomer who was rapidly generating buzz, Eddie Murphy. But Murphy, himself an up-and-coming star heavily inspired by Pryor, balked at the idea of stepping into a role so clearly earmarked for his comedic hero. In his mind, appearing alongside Gene Wilder might inadvertently paint him as a mere understudy or imitation of Pryor's style, especially since audiences perceived Wilder and Pryor as an inseparable comedic pair. Murphy feared overshadowing or direct comparison, leading him to push for Wilder's replacement as well. This was a bold stance for someone who, at that moment, was still largely untested in film. Indeed, when director John Landis pitched Murphy to Paramount, the studio hesitated because Murphy's breakthrough 48 Hours had not yet been released. Nobody knew for sure if he could headline a major motion picture. Despite the uncertainty, Landis insisted Murphy's comedic brilliance could carry the role of Billy Ray Valentine. Ultimately, the studio took the gamble, forging a new comedic combination: Eddie Murphy's brash, streetwise energy paired with Dan Aykroyd's more buttoned-down style. In hindsight, the pivot away from Pryor and Wilder gave Trading Places a chance to stand apart. Murphy soared, proving he wasn't just a reflection of his idol, but a comedic force with his own distinct swagger. This unexpected twist, fueled by Pryor's misfortune and Murphy's determined self-awareness, ended up shaping the film's entire identity. Without it, Billy Ray Valentine might have been a Richard Pryor retread. Instead, he became a defining role for Eddie Murphy, launching him from Saturday Night Live novelty into cinematic superstardom. Number 4, Don Ameche's unusual casting journey. When it came to selecting the crusty Duke brothers, Mortimer and Randolph, director John Landis faced a mix of comedic and logistical challenges. Initially, Ray Milland, famous for his Oscar-winning turn in The Lost Weekend, was set to tackle Mortimer Duke. However, studio insurance requirements demanded a thorough health clearance. During that screening, Millen failed to pass, effectively removing him from consideration. Landis then proposed Donna Meche, a star from the golden age of Hollywood, known for polished performances in the 1930s and 1940s. But the studio's response was baffling. They claimed they couldn't locate AMECH'S. Jokingly or not, someone asked, "Isn't he dead?" As it turned out, AMECH'S was very much alive, just long out of the limelight. Landis persevered and tracked him down, though AMECH'S initially hesitated to return to a medium he thought had passed him by. The final sticking point was money. AMECH'S discovered that Milland had been promised a certain salary, and he insisted on receiving the same figure. Some at Paramount balked, questioning if an older star who hadn't headlined a film in years was worth the hassle. Yet Landis believed AMECH'S could perfectly embody Mortimer's crusty snobbery, playing an old money baron who treats everyday people like pawns. AMECH'S finally accepted, stepping into a comedic role drastically different from his earlier, more wholesome screen image. Yet his transformation was spot on. Audiences found his Mortimer Duke amusingly pompous, giving a fresh comedic spark to a veteran performer. Indeed, just 2 years later, AMECH'S won an Academy Award for his memorable part in Cocoon, 1985. In a sense, Trading Places revived his career, introducing him to a new generation that had never known his 1940s-era stardom. He bristled briefly at the film's profanity, particularly a late scene where Mortimer curses a group of traders, but Landis insisted it was necessary for the story's comedic payoff. AMECH'S ultimately conceded, rehearsing it meticulously so he could deliver the line once and never repeat it. That single scene, capturing his outrage, remains one of the funniest moments in Trading Places, a testament to how an unexpected casting twist can yield comedic gold. Number 5. Donna Meche, religious conflict with profanity. Although Donna Meche was indeed cast to revitalize the role of Mortimer Duke, his strong religious upbringing created an unexpected conflict. In the film's climactic scene, Mortimer explodes into a fit of fury on the trading floor, spewing a colorful expletive at the top of his lungs. For most actors, throwing in a curse word might be part of the job, but for AMECH'S, raised in a devout Catholic family, this was uncharted territory he found deeply uncomfortable. Upon reading the script's final draft, AMECH'S discovered the line was more than just mild irritation. It was a full-blown outburst that would require him to break his personal rule about swearing on screen. He approached John Landis, explaining how it clashed with his faith and personal sense of propriety. Landis, unwavering, felt the moment was central to Mortimer's meltdown. That polished veneer needed to crack publicly, letting the audience witness how undone Mortimer becomes when he faces financial ruin. AMECH'S argued for a toned-down version, maybe a lesser oath or a cutaway shot. But Landis insisted that comedic impact came from Mortimer crossing the line so drastically it shocked viewers who'd grown used to his refined old-money aura. Eventually, AMECH'S relented, but only under the condition he'd get one take. He wanted everything perfect, lighting, blocking, and camera positioning, so he could muster the nerve just once. Landis agreed, ensuring the entire crew stood ready. The moment arrived. AMECH'S stood amid the bustling extras playing traders, inhaled deeply, then unleashed the profanity with such force that even seasoned cast members jumped. True to his word, Landis called cut, satisfied they'd captured comedic lightning. AMECH'S refused a second take, promptly stepping off the floor with a mixture of relief and residual adrenaline. This single F-bomb not only deepened Mortimer's downfall, but also revealed how personal convictions can clash with film demands. For all the comedic bits in Trading Places, this scene demonstrates the lengths some actors go to remain faithful to a role, even when it pricks at deeply held beliefs. The line has since become legendary among fans, partially because it came from AMECH'S, a gentlemanly star from Hollywood's past, who virtually never stooped to cursing on screen. That raw break in character underscores how severe the Duke brothers' unraveling really is. Number 6. Casting Jamie Lee Curtis as Ophelia. Securing Jamie Lee Curtis for the role of Ophelia was anything but straightforward. Though she'd gained attention through John Carpenter's Halloween, 1978, and subsequent horror credits like The Fog and Terror Train, Curtis was firmly labeled a scream queen. Director John Landis, however, saw potential beyond the shrieks and dark corridors. In the script, Ophelia was the tough, sardonic hooker with a heart of gold, a comedic pivot from typical slasher fare. Landis believed Curtis could balance the character's streetwise wit with a sympathetic vulnerability, but Paramount executives were skeptical of an actress so entrenched in horror. Landis insisted that comedic timing was something Curtis innately possessed, citing interviews and off-screen glimpses that showcased her sense of humor. He reasoned that if she could handle suspense and terror convincingly, harnessing comedic dialogue wouldn't be far-fetched. The studio reluctantly signed off, convinced only by Landis's track record, The Blues Brothers, An American Werewolf in London, and the script's strong comedic beats. Once Curtis arrived on set, she found herself needing to prove to an entire team that she wasn't just the Halloween girl. She threw herself into comedic rehearsals, learning how to pivot from dramatic tension to quick one-liners. One particularly tricky sequence was the train scene, which demanded farcical costumes and accents. Curtis was assigned an Austrian accent, but stumbled, mixing it with Swedish inflections. Instead of scrapping the botched accent, Landis saw comedic gold. The result was a hilariously mismatched portrayal that illustrated Ophelia's desperation to participate in a ruse, no matter how unconvincing. That moment revealed Curtis's knack for turning mistakes into spontaneous comedy. Audiences later praised Curtis's portrayal, enjoying how Ophelia's salty street smarts contrasted Dan Aykroyd's more refined meltdown. She played the role with a level of sincerity that made viewers root for her. For Curtis, Trading Places became a springboard, liberating her from typecasting. Suddenly, producers realized she wasn't just adept at fleeing masked killers. She could tackle comedic scripts and hold her own alongside comedic powerhouses like Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. That impetus shifted her career, leading her to broader comedic roles, including the eventual highlight in A Fish Called Wanda, 1988. Looking back, one might argue that Trading Places exemplified Hollywood's best-case scenario, an unconventional casting choice that blossomed into a defining moment for an actor's artistry. Number 7, improvised scenes. And the accent goof Trading Places is often praised for its well-structured script, but part of its charm also comes from unplanned moments that ended up on camera. One noteworthy example is the train sequence, where Jamie Lee Curtis's character Ophelia impersonates an Austrian cultural attaché, except her accent meanders wildly, dipping into an almost Swedish lilt. Initially, Curtis had been coached to speak with a crisp Austrian tone, but under the pressure of filming, plus juggling comedic timing, she slipped into a nonsensical hybrid of Europe's northern dialects. Director John Landis could have reshot the scene for a more authentic accent, but he recognized something magical about Curtis's stumbling delivery. It lent a farcical humor that fit perfectly into the chaotic environment. Audiences see the gag play out. Billy Ray Valentine, Eddie Murphy, is already disguised as a Jamaican. Dan Aykroyd's Louis Winthorpe III lurks under an unconvincing Santa beard, and the entire group is in over their heads. So a fumbled accent only heightens the comedic desperation. Viewers laugh not because it's a polished impression, but because it's so blatantly off that it underscores the character's frenzied scramble to fool Clarence Beeks. Another instance of spontaneous humor occurred when Dan Aykroyd's Santa-clad Winthrop tries to eat a stolen salmon through his beard, an image so absurd it teeters between tragic and hilarious. Aykroyd's action was partially scripted, but the grotesque smearing of salmon in Santa beard just looked even more pathetic than planned. Landis let the camera linger, capturing the comedic gold. Eddie Murphy also fired off extra one-liners during reaction shots, playing off the set atmosphere. These unscripted or half-scripted bits show how comedic chemistry on set can trump carefully orchestrated scenes. Instead of rigidly following each line, Landis permitted comedic instincts to breathe life into the frame. Years later, fans still pinpoint these unscripted hiccups, like Ophelia's accent fiasco, as highlights. They reflect a creative environment where mistakes or ad-libs aren't flaws but gifts, further elevating Trading Places from a standard 1980s comedy to an enduring classic that remains funny precisely because it doesn't always color inside the lines. Number 8. G. Gordon, Liddy, and Clarence Beeks. Clarence Beeks, the ruthless security consultant turned insider trader, stands out as one of Trading Places' more sinister comedic foils. The role eventually landed in the hands of Paul Gleason, whose stern demeanor would later be recognized in The Breakfast Club as the rigid Principal Vernon. Yet Gleason wasn't the first choice. John Landis and his team initially approached G. Gordon Liddy, yes, the infamous Watergate conspirator, hoping to cast him in a role that took advantage of his formidable public persona. Liddy, known for a no-nonsense approach and a certain brazen attitude, seemed like a sharp comedic addition. He even entertained the notion for a while, intrigued by the chance to parody his own tough guy image. However, everything derailed when he learned the film's finale included a scene in which Clarence Beeks, forcibly subdued, ends up trapped in a cage with a gorilla. The comedic comeuppance was playful but humiliating, involving the suggestion that the gorilla had amorous intentions. Liddy purportedly balked at that idea, finding it too outlandish or undignified. When Liddy exited, Paul Gleason stepped in, transforming Beeks into a character who radiates an even colder corporate menace. This shift probably benefited the film. Gleason conveyed a by-the-book bureaucrat with a mean streak, an approach that anchored the more cartoonish final twist with genuine tension. The cameo of Beeks reading Liddy's own autobiography, Will, on the train served as a lingering nod to the original plan, slyly referencing the Watergate figure in absentia. For viewers, the entire predicament, Beeks getting physically overpowered by Billy Ray and Winthorpe, then tossed in with a lovesick gorilla, becomes one of the movie's comedic pinnacles. It's fascinating to imagine how drastically different that last act might have felt with Liddy. His real-world notoriety might have overshadowed the comedic set piece, turning it into a meta-commentary on political scandal. Instead, Gleason's portrayal keeps the focus squarely on the film's outlandish sense of justice, punishing the double-dealing Beeks in a weird but hilarious manner. Number 9. Star-studded cameos, including Frank Oz Trading Places, brims with cameos, and small roles from recognizable faces, creating a spot-the-celebrity game that fans relish. One of the most notable cameo masters is Frank Oz, famously the voice behind Muppets like Miss Piggy and Fozzie Bear, as well as the performer who gave life to Yoda in Star Wars. In Trading Places, Oz pops up as a police officer managing Louis Winthorpe, the third's personal effects upon his arrest. The scene echoes Oz's cameo in The Blues Brothers, another John Landis film, where he also catalogs property for an ex-con's release. This recurring bit of Oz effectively ties Landis's comedic universe together, delighting fans who notice the pattern. Music legend Bo Diddley also surfaces in a small but amusing appearance as the pawnshop owner who deals with Winthorpe's possessions. Although only on screen briefly, the cameo is a playful intersection between classic rock and roll and comedic cinema. It's a sly nod that even in this chaotic world of switched fortunes, iconic figures might randomly pop into your life. Giancarlo Esposito, who decades later would become the chilling villain Gus Fring on Breaking Bad, shows up as a cellmate with a minimal line or two. His face is almost blink and you miss it, but for those who revisit Trading Places now, it's a thrill to see him in embryonic form. Jim Belushi, though not quite a cameo, has a silly but memorable turn as the boorish man in a gorilla costume, inadvertently facilitating Clarence Beeks's humiliating downfall. Perhaps the biggest surprise cameo is Landis himself, briefly standing on a sidewalk near Billy Ray Valentine after his release from jail. He's cloaked in a trench coat, briefcase in hand, and might have easily gone unnoticed, except for fans who comb each frame. Putting all these appearances together, the film feels like a comedic carnival with familiar faces popping up around every corner. Each cameo, however small, helps craft an environment bursting with comedic potential, as if everyone from Muppet Legends to vintage rockers decided to crash the party. That approach builds excitement for viewers, who never know which well-known figure might show up next. Number 10, Franken and Davis as bellhoppers, a Plan B SCTV's McKenzie brothers, Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas, were initially in line to appear as the baggage handlers who mishandle Clarence Beeks in the train's final sequence. At the time, the McKenzie brothers were riding high on their comedic brand, soon to headline their own film, Strange Brew, also released in 1983. Their zany back-and-forth banter about hosers and takeoff had garnered them a cult following. So for Trading Places, the notion of seeing these two comedic forces cameoing as baggage-handling conspirators seemed a perfect comedic synergy, yet schedules clashed. Moranis and Thomas found themselves locked into projects and promotional duties. Meanwhile, production deadlines for Trading Places advanced. John Landis, committed to keeping that comedic dynamic, recalled two other comedic talents, Al Franken and Tom Davis. The duo had made waves as writers and occasional performers on Saturday Night Live, earning a reputation for their offbeat humor and comedic chemistry. When Landis approached them about stepping in, they leapt at the chance. The resulting cameo sees Franken and Davis as the inept baggage handlers who unwittingly become accessories to Winthorpe and Valentine's scheme. They not only accept the gorilla costume in a hilarious mix-up, but also contribute to Clarence Beeks's downfall by inadvertently caging him up. It's a short but memorable bit, full of the duo's awkward rapport. Watching them bicker or flail around with the forklift is comedic gravy for fans who know them from SNL. Although it's tempting to wonder how Moranis and Thomas might have played it, Franken and Davis own the moment with an offhand absurdity. It's a testament to Landis's adaptability. Confronted with the McKenzie's scheduling conflict, he pivoted to another comedic pairing who delivered that same zany vibe. In turn, Franken and Davis carved themselves a small but iconic niche in 1980s cinema, ensuring that the train set piece remains one of Trading Places' comedic high points. A swirl of costumes, bungled plans, and two baggage guys who have no idea they're facilitating an epic comeuppance. Number 11, Real Traders Cause Trouble at the Commodity Exchange. Perhaps one of the biggest behind-the-scenes challenges came during filming at the World Trade Center's Commodity Exchange, a pivotal spot for the film's grand finale. The production had a brilliant idea: film on a weekday amid genuine stock traders, capturing the authentic mania that occurs when fortunes rise and plummet in seconds. Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd were supposed to waltz into the bustling trading floor, improvising their comedic lines while cameras discreetly rolled. But reality had different plans. The second the real traders spotted Murphy and Aykroyd, both recognized from TV and film, they swarmed to watch, ignoring the pulsating commodity trades on their monitors. Suddenly, the usual cacophony of buy and sell orders fizzled into starstruck chaos. The production notes claim that up to $6 billion worth of trading halted, overshadowed by the presence of these comedic actors. Financial managers and floor officials panicked at the potential losses, swiftly concluding that letting Hollywood tinker in a real, live trading environment was untenable. After that fiasco, the filming schedule was rearranged. The team switched to weekends when the floor was closed, staging the scenes with carefully selected extras and cooperative real traders. This pivot allowed them to replicate the frantic energy of a normal trading day without interfering with actual transactions. Had they insisted on weekdays, the cost to the real market might have been enormous, and the confusion too great to manage. In the final cut, audiences see that swirl of chaos: phone calls, shouting traders, papers flying, fortunes reversing in a matter of seconds. The fact that a chunk of the environment's authenticity is staged doesn't detract from the spectacle. If anything, the near disaster underscores how potent Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd's celebrity was in 1983, and how risky it can be to blend live commerce with comedic production. The story behind the fiasco also reveals the film's commitment to realness, striving to depict the merciless volatility of commodity trading in a comedic lens. Number 12. The Eddie Murphy Rule, and insider trading, one of Trading Places' most surprising real-world legacies, is how it indirectly influenced legislation. The film's climax sees Louis Winthorpe III and Billy Ray Valentine leveraging government secrets, specifically an orange crop report, to upend the Duke brothers' scheme. They orchestrate a move on the commodities market that yields them immense profits while crippling the Dukes. At the time of the film's release in 1983, using misappropriated government information for commodity trades was not explicitly unlawful in the sense we know today. Fast forward to the 21st century, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010 included a section sometimes referred to as the Eddie Murphy Rule. This rule clarified that exploiting government data in commodity trading counts as illegal insider trading. Even though the film was comedic, it inadvertently highlighted a glaring loophole. Policymakers realized that if unscrupulous traders acquired advanced knowledge of a government report, akin to the fictional orange crop forecast, they could manipulate markets for enormous gains, just as the Dukes intended. While no senator stood on the floor and said, "We must pass the Eddie Murphy Rule," the coincidence was noted by financial pundits who recognized that Trading Places had prophetically exposed the vulnerability. Suddenly, jokes from the film entered serious congressional discourse, used as an anecdotal illustration of why reforms were necessary. This comedic reference underscores the odd synergy between pop culture and policy. For fans, the real twist is that Billy Ray and Lewis's final stunt, though comedic, pinpoints how crucial, accurate, untainted information is in markets. The Eddie Murphy Rule cements the film's socioeconomic commentary. Behind the pratfalls and wisecracks lies a question of moral hazard and fairness. The Dukes intended to profit from stolen data, but ironically, it's Winthrop and Valentine who use it to turn the tables. Regardless, the comedic outcome spurred reflections in the real world, proving that a farcical 1980s movie could help shape financial regulation nearly 3 decades later. Number 13. AMECHE and BELLAMY'S return in Coming to America. After Trading Places soared at the box office, viewers wondered what happened to the ruined Duke brothers, two men of immense wealth, left with nothing, stumbling around in tatters after losing their entire fortunes. Director John Landis and star Eddie Murphy had the same curiosity, and their next collaboration, Coming to America, 1988, answered that question in one hilarious cameo. In Coming to America, Murphy plays Prince Akeem, a sheltered royal visiting Queens, New York, to find genuine love. During his philanthropic stroll in the city, he encounters two homeless men huddled together in a grimy alley. With no fanfare, the camera reveals them to be none other than Randolph, Ralph Bellamy, and Mortimer, Don Ameche, Duke. Fans who recognized them from Trading Places roared with delight. The scene is brief but unforgettable. Akeem, compassionately tossing them a wad of cash, never grasps the significance. But the Duke brothers, wide-eyed, realize they just got a lifeline. Randolph exclaims, "We're back," a triumphant echo of the bet they made in the previous movie, only this time reversed from wealthy to destitute. This cameo does two things. First, it cements the notion that Landis and Murphy's comedic universes share a playful continuity, linking the comedic arcs of multiple films. Second, it shows that comedic redemption arcs can sometimes happen, even for villainous characters like the Dukes, albeit in small doses. The cameo only lasts seconds, yet it lingers as one of Coming to America's best in-jokes, delighting fans who appreciate the synergy between two cult comedic classics. For Bellamy and Ameche, it was a fun chance to revisit the squabbling siblings, though they appear far from the powerful men who once manipulated stock markets. They're left with a glimmer of renewed hope, ironically, courtesy of an Eddie Murphy character yet again. The cameo, short though it may be, underscores how deeply Trading Places had woven itself into 1980s pop culture. By bridging these comedic worlds, the filmmakers gave fans a hidden payoff, a wink that says the Dukes might never truly retire from the comedic spotlight, no matter how big their downfall. Number budget, box office, and weekly rankings. Trading Places carried a production budget of roughly $15 million, a decent chunk of change in the early 80s, though not extravagant by modern standards. Paramount backed it, banking on the comedic synergy between Dan Aykroyd, fresh from Saturday Night Live, success in the Blues Brothers, and Eddie Murphy, who was just starting his cinematic ascent. Director John Landis was a proven comedic hitmaker, further solidifying the studio's confidence. When Trading Places hit theaters in June 1983, it faced formidable competition. Star Wars: Return of the Jedi had been released just a few weeks prior, dominating box office headlines. Despite Jedi's cultural juggernaut status, Trading Places carved out a strong niche. Over the summer, it hovered among the top 10 highest-grossing films for more than 12 consecutive weeks. Though it never clinched the number one spot, it steadily racked up ticket sales weekend after weekend, eventually collecting a worldwide gross of around $120 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's a substantial return. Industry observers lauded its performance, calling it a sleeper smash. In an era when comedic films often had shorter theatrical runs, Trading Places exhibited long legs, continuing to draw crowds through word-of-mouth praise. Viewers responded to the comedic contrast of Murphy's streetwise hustle, Aykroyd's meltdown from aristocrat to vagrant, and Jamie Lee Curtis's sharp, savvy Ophelia. The presence of veteran actors like Don Ameche, Ralph Bellamy, and Denholm Elliott added cross-generational appeal. This robust box office run also showcased how an R-rated comedy could resonate widely, provided it balanced raunchy humor with genuine heart, exemplified by the moral comeuppance for the Duke brothers and the scrappy partnership between Billy Ray and Winthrop. From Paramount's perspective, Trading Places became one of the year's top draws, overshadowed globally only by a few blockbusters. In a decade that revered big commercial spectacles, the film proved that comedic cunning, tight pacing, and well-placed star power could hold its own, generating both critical favor and fat box office receipts. Number 15. Filming in Philadelphia and beyond. Choosing Philadelphia as a backdrop was strategic, as the city exudes a vibe of old money tradition, while also standing as an iconic symbol of America's foundational ideals. Timothy Harris liked Philadelphia's historical significance, the Constitution, the Liberty Bell, the spirit of 1776, contrasting comedic extremes of wealth and underprivilege against the city that birthed the all men are created equal ideal. For the production, exterior shoots around Philly endured for 15 days. Landis captured the imposing grandeur of establishments like Independence Hall and Rittenhouse Square, visually grounding the Duke brothers' wealth in a city famed for enterprise and old-world architecture. However, interiors told a different story. While the movie claimed certain scenes unfolded Duke and Duke's opulent offices near the city's colonial heart, these were actually filmed back in New York City. Landis found the logistical needs, lighting, controlled sets, more practical within a Manhattan studio environment. Scenes involving Dan Aykroyd's meltdown or the Duke's intricately decorated boardrooms were constructed meticulously so that they appeared continuous with Philly's exteriors. Interestingly, wrapping occurred not on the East Coast but in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where the final sequence shows Winthrop, Valentine, and Ophelia basking in tropical breezes, celebrating their triumph over the Dukes. This sun-splashed coda captured a sense of comedic release, as if the characters had truly escaped the city's frenetic capitalism. Crews faced typical tropical challenges, sudden rain showers, strong winds, and import complexities for the filming equipment, but overall the location gave the movie its breezy final note. For Philadelphians, Trading Places left an indelible pop culture legacy. Tourists often visit the film's iconic spots, such as the exterior of the now-gone Duke and Duke building. The comedic highlight of Billy Ray Valentine spouting lines from the steps of a stately building, or Winthrop hobbling around Rittenhouse in a filthy Santa suit, remains etched in people's minds. In an era before tourism boards actively leveraged film tie-ins, Philadelphia found itself accidentally showcased as a comedic stage, a place where a well-bred snob and a street hustler collided in a storyline, weaving local city charm with comedic chaos. Number 16. Restaurant Homage and its closure. After the film's success, Philadelphia entrepreneurs jumped on the opportunity to tap the Trading Places craze. One such endeavor was a restaurant named Winthrop and Valentine, nestled inside the Westin Hotel. The concept strove to blend the comedic spirit of the film with the city's own gastronomic identity, presumably serving American bistro fare in an environment nodding to the upscale-turned-chaotic vibe of Louis Winthrop III and Billy Ray Valentine. The decor likely featured playful references, maybe a battered Santa coat framed on a wall, or subtle in-jokes referencing the Dukes. Locals and tourists alike found the name instantly recognizable, conjuring images of swanky suits, comedic wealth swaps, and Eddie Murphy's grin. For a while, the novelty flourished. Guests could pretend they were stepping into the film's narrative, sipping cocktails with regal names, or ordering menu items that tease the comedic arcs, like a gorilla suit steak, if the owners were bold. Enthusiasts recounted that the restaurant tried to recreate an ambiance akin to the refined gentility you see at the Duke and Duke offices, albeit with an undercurrent of playful mockery. However, despite the strong brand association, the restaurant eventually shuttered. Such closures happen for myriad reasons: stiff competition, shifting hotel management, or simply the difficulty of sustaining a concept-based eatery once the novelty fades. Yet for a time, Winthrop and Valentine offered a direct link to the comedic world John Landis conjured, an ephemeral chance for fans to dine in a space paying homage to that hilarious storyline. People who managed to dine there before the closure still recall it with a hint of nostalgia, especially if they were devotees of the film. Some mention small touches like waitstaff recounting their favorite scenes or the wine list referencing comedic lines. While it no longer exists, the restaurant remains a footnote in Trading Places lore, highlighting how deeply the film's comedic brand became woven into Philadelphia's cultural tapestry. Number 17. Kelly Curtis and the Curtis Family, Tie. Jamie Lee Curtis was already forging her comedic path in Trading Places, but the film also provided a small role for her sister, Kelly Curtis. If you watch closely, you'll spot Kelly playing Muffy, a high society blonde who flutters around Billy Ray Valentine once he's made his splash in upper crust circles. The cameo is brief, but piqued interest among fans aware of the Curtis family pedigree. Janet Leigh was their mother, a Hollywood icon from Psycho, 1960, and Tony Curtis, a major star of the 1950s and 60s, was their father. Acting was practically in the Curtis bloodstream. For Kelly, who had fewer than 10 credits at that time, Trading Places was an early stepping stone. She would later accumulate around 20 screen roles, including a recurring presence on the 1996 TV series The Sentinel. Though never as prominent as Jamie Lee, Kelly possessed a resemblance to her sister, a certain angular face and poised carriage that made her cameo intriguing. She wasn't there to scream or run from slashers, but to represent the idle rich, providing comedic friction in a scene where Billy Ray's newfound status attracts superficial admirers. Fans sometimes wonder if John Landis recognized a potential synergy. He'd already risked enough by casting Jamie Lee Curtis, famous for horror roles, in a comedic turn. Perhaps adding Kelly was simply a cameo flourish to amuse the cast. Alternatively, it might have been happenstance or a nod to Jamie's request. Regardless, the scene highlights how the Curtis siblings collaborated briefly on a set that catapulted Jamie out of the horror niche. For film enthusiasts, it's a small but telling Curtis family moment, underscoring how Hollywood often fosters these familial connections in cameo form. Kelly Curtis's cameo also underscores the film's playful layers. Muffy is just another piece of high society scenery in Billy Ray's improbable new life, a comedic nuance referencing how quickly the snobbish set can pivot, latching onto whoever seems flush with fortune. Number 18. An Italian Christmas Tradition. What do you picture when you think of Christmas Eve in Italy? Maybe lavish dinners of fish dishes, midnight mass, or family gatherings. Strangely enough, over the years, Trading Places has slipped into that holiday tapestry, broadcast annually on Italian TV, specifically on Italia 1, every Christmas Eve. It's one of those curious cultural fusions where a quintessentially American R-rated comedy from the 1980s has become as much a Christmas fixture as panettone and nativity scenes. Why did it take hold there? Possibly the film's comedic critiques of class generosity and redemption resonate across borders, especially around the holiday season. Italians love feel-good narratives with a twist of farce, and Trading Places offers exactly that. A scoundrel and a snob forced to see each other's world. The film's final flourish of comeuppance for the wicked Duke brothers, plus the triumphant sense of Billy Ray and Winthrop forging their own fortune, can easily be seen as a thematic echo of underdog stories or moral renewal, a fitting theme for the holiday spirit. Moreover, the comedic timing of Eddie Murphy transcends language barriers. Italians, well known for enjoying physical humor and spirited performances, embraced the comedic synergy of Murphy and Aykroyd. The annual broadcast cements a tradition. Families gather, perhaps after dinner or midnight mass, to watch Trading Places for a good laugh. Over the decades, multiple generations in Italy have grown up associating the film's raucous scenes with the warmth of Christmas gatherings. For many Americans, it's surprising to learn that a film set amid a bleak winter in Philadelphia, featuring Santa suits, cheap jokes, and stock market chaos, has metamorphosed into an Italian holiday phenomenon. But that's a testament to cinema's ability to forge unique global traditions. Over time, Trading Places has become a staple in Italy's winter lineup, ensuring that each new generation experiences the comedic meltdown of Dan Aykroyd in a filthy Santa beard as an integral part of their Christmas Eve festivities. Number 19. Philadelphia's Westin Hotel and Winthrop and Valentine. Before its closure, the Westin Hotel in Philadelphia housed a restaurant slyly named Winthrop and Valentine. This reference, of course, was a nod to the film's two main protagonists, who hail from such wildly different worlds but end up forging an unlikely partnership. The concept tickled the fancy of locals. People would drop by to feast on the comedic nostalgia. On the walls, you might have glimpsed promotional stills or subtle tributes to the film's comedic motifs. Perhaps a photo of Eddie Murphy's Billy Ray Valentine in a dapper suit, or Dan Aykroyd's Louis Winthrop III wearing a battered Santa outfit. The restaurant's marketing boasted allusions to the movie's rich man, poor man storyline, theming certain dishes around comedic elements, a Duke and Duke special, maybe a salmon a la Santa. Servers, decked in formal attire, would occasionally quip lines from the film, especially when describing items like the frozoned orange juice cocktail, referencing the infamous commodity that undid the Dukes. For fans, the ephemeral allusions made dinner feel like stepping into the Trading Places universe for an hour or two. However, the restaurant shuttered some years later, succumbing to shifting hotel management or changing dining trends. Once it closed, the ephemeral connection to Trading Places in that physical space vanished, leaving just an anecdote for fans who dined there. Its existence, though brief, underscores the film's enduring local impact. Philadelphia has a storied culinary landscape, yet ephemeral theme restaurants often pop up around iconic local references, from Rocky Balboa tributes to glimpses of old architecture. Winthrop and Valentine captured that comedic moment in time, giving Philly locals and traveling fans a whimsical place to toast one of the city's funniest pop culture tributes. Now, it's a memory for those who managed to snag a meal there, or at least see the sign and chuckle at how deeply the film's comedic spirit sank into the city's everyday fabric. Number 20. Kelly Curtis and the Curtis family tie. Jamie Lee Curtis was already forging her comedic path in Trading Places, but the film also provided a small role for her sister, Kelly Curtis. If you watch closely, you'll spot Kelly playing Muffy, a high society blonde who flutters around Billy Ray Valentine once he's made his splash in upper crust circles. The cameo is brief, but piqued interest among fans aware of the Curtis family pedigree. Janet Leigh was their mother, a Hollywood icon from Psycho, 1960, and Tony Curtis, a major star of the 1950s and 60s, was their father. Acting was practically in the Curtis bloodstream. For Kelly, who had fewer than 10 credits at that time, Trading Places was an early stepping stone. She would later accumulate around 20 screen roles, including a recurring presence on the 1996 TV series The Sentinel. Though never as prominent as Jamie Lee, Kelly possessed a resemblance to her sister, a certain angular face and poised carriage that made her cameo intriguing. She wasn't there to scream or run from slashers, but to represent the idle rich, providing comedic friction in a scene where Billy Ray's newfound status attracts superficial admirers. Fans sometimes wonder if John Landis recognized a potential synergy. He'd already risked enough by casting Jamie Lee Curtis, famous for horror roles, in a comedic turn. Perhaps adding Kelly was simply a cameo flourish to amuse the cast. Alternatively, it might have been happenstance or a nod to Jamie's request. Regardless, the scene highlights how the Curtis siblings collaborated briefly on a set that catapulted Jamie out of the horror niche. For film enthusiasts, it's a small but telling Curtis family moment, underscoring how Hollywood often fosters these familial connections in cameo form. Kelly Curtis's cameo also underscores the film's playful layers. Muffy is just another piece of high society scenery in Billy Ray's improbable new life, a comedic nuance referencing how quickly the snobbish set can pivot, latching onto whoever seems flush with fortune. That's the scoop behind this 1983 gem, from accidental casting twists to hidden cameo mania. If you enjoyed these reveals, show some love. Like this video, drop a comment on your favorite behind-the-scenes tidbit, and subscribe for more deep dives into film history. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time.